All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Someone is awake. It's always the joy of being in the afternoon on day 2 of something like this, and everybody's a little tired, a little run out. You spent too much time at the churro or the ice cream station or the whichever random food is being pushed into your face. But thanks for being here. I know it will be recorded, so if you need to come back to anything, you can talk about that later on. But as we start, I want to lay a few ground rules. Former teacher, former middle school teacher, go figure. Please know that in here, if you're not getting what you think you came in for, or if you're not getting something that feeds you, or if life happens, you know, a phone rings, you got to go take something, please step out. If you're not getting what you need, go to another session. I'm fine with that, okay? That's why we're here. That's why we go to these sessions. You can learn and take stuff that's for you. If it's not for you, great. I'm not offended. Move on, okay? Rule number 2. You all are going to have to talk. Both to each other. Okay, and we're gonna yeah, that's half the room gets up and goes out. A lot of give and take, a lot of back and forth. But what that also means is that's going to make you think a little bit more about your specific situation, how this is going to apply to you, some of that internalization of what it is that we're doing. Okay, so just know that there will be questions. I am great with awkward silence. Okay. You guys will figure it out at the first couple questions, and you'll get involved, I know. Okay? So we're talking about what are we doing? What are we doing? Talking about tomorrow's education based on where we are today. That's a lot in one short sentence right there. Okay? A lot of what we're going to look at is going to be some of the structure that'll get us to move forward. I wish I had that crystal ball. I wish I knew, even 2 years ago, what was coming. I wish I knew, here's the 10 top things that you need to work on in your classroom. But we know the minute we walk out that door, 2 of them change. We also know that each of those things is not going to be the exact same for each and every one of you. So keep that in mind, okay? That's why I said we're going to make it a little bit of that personalization for each of you, because we're all different. We're all across the country. We're all in different spots. We're all in different ministries. We're all in different places in our life. All right, so or not. I'm Matt Bergholt. My official title is I am the Continuous Improvement Specialist at the Lutheran Church Extension Fund. Some of you may have seen my name come up before working for the LCMS School Ministry Office. This is a recent change. I switched to LCEF back in November of this last year. It was a good change for me personally and professionally, and also for LCEF as an organization. Continuous Improvement Specialist is looking at where we are and helping push a little bit. Where are we going? What types of ways can we get better at what we do? What do we do? Investigating the processes internally that make us tick as LCEF and why that matters. So a little bit of that forward thinking. Where we go from here? Shocking. Okay. This whole presentation, for any of you who are taking notes or snapping pictures, is already uploaded into the app. So if you need to get that, you can download it and email it to yourself from there. My contact information, please reach out in any way, shape, or form. That office phone has to be on there, but I don't physically have an office. I work from home. So it'll ring somewhere, I think. And then I'll get a message and I'll have to call you back. But please reach out with questions or thoughts or anything else going on after this down the road. Okay. It's big enough for room. I'm not going to do the old school. We're going to go around and figure out where everybody's at. Okay? But what I want you to do, find somebody near you who you do not know. That's hard for some of you. Someone who you do not know near you. Introduce yourself. Name, location, and role. What you do. Ready? Go. right, 10 seconds. As I've said in the past when I do presentations like this, and I give a room full of adults time to talk, especially when we haven't talked to adults really for the last 2 years, this pause time is always hard. Because you're like, I want to keep talking to the person. Great. Keep that relationship going down the road. That's what best practice is about. Talk, ask questions. You're going to learn from each other as we go through as well about what makes their unique ministry tick also. All right, so that's all of you. I want to give you just that real quick walkthrough of how I got to where I am and why that's important about the conversation we're going to have today. Okay? So many moons ago, I took my first call to Trinity Lutheran School in Orlando, Florida. Great place for a first call. We had congregation members that were Disney cast members. It was great. And this was coming from somebody who lived in Northern Illinois for the beginning part of his life. First call was great. I was teaching middle school, 6, 7, 8 social studies, math. By the end, I was also director of technology there too. Some of you know my tech side also. So classroom teacher, very different from what I had done in the past. I student taught as a high school teacher in Chicago. Slightly different teaching middle school in Orlando. But it set me up for where I would go next. After that, I went to St. Luke's Lutheran Church and School in Oviedo, Florida for 1 year. I was the, what was the official title there? Goodness. Classroom technology instructor. So I did professional development for teachers on tech. When you're triple graded all the way through the school, there's enough teachers that you can do that with. Okay? So it was teaching adults how to use the technology in their classroom, how to push things forward in what they were doing in their day-to-day, everyday teaching. And then, having had this background in education, I decided, you know what? I'll go be a bureaucrat. Really? And I made the move to work at the LCMS International Center in St. Louis in the school ministry office. So I still kept my toe in the school ministry pond. There I was responsible for all of our publications. National Lutheran Schools Week, Chapel Talks, the monthly mailing, little website called LuthEd, social media, LuthEd Facebook group, etc. Okay? Amidst going out and doing presentations and stuff like this to schools and districts and everybody else. While I wasn't doing that, though, I was also really looking at, what do we do? How can we make that better? We do all of these programs from Synod. We had SLED, school leadership. We had all the pieces that were tied to what was the LEAF, that we moved to CMIF. All these different things that were programs that we did. You know, what we do. And a lot of it was, well, how can we make that better? How can we make it more applicable to all of you? I did that for 7 years. And like I said, back in November of this last year, I moved literally across the highway to the LCEF building. Okay, it's weird going into the office, looking out the window and going, I used to work there. A little different. Here, like I said, continuous improvement specialist. It's a new position. It's looking at why we do what we do, how we do it, and how do we make that better. Those are hard questions that, for us as LCF, we haven't asked that as an organization. We didn't do that well. Very rarely will people know, well, why are we doing this? Because we've always done it that way. Excuse me. I choke on that every time I say it. It's a Lutheran organization. I'll say that with all the love in my heart. But the jokes stick. We're Lutheran. Back of the room, folk. We're stuck in our ways. Sometimes we just do it because. Okay, culturally or not. So asking those hard questions, from being a middle school teacher, asking the hard questions, all the way up through, has gotten me to the point where I'm inherently looking at how do we make what we do better. Okay? All of that said, I learned one other thing through all of my time, working with adults, working with kids, across the board. Everyone in some way, shape, or form is an educator. Now, I'll have people push back on me. And I said, have you taught anybody anything lately? And it gets them thinking. They're like, yeah. I mean to put that up there because regardless of what role you fill, okay, whether you're a teacher, classroom teacher, administrator, whatever, what you all learn about when you talk to each other, okay, we all need to take that step back and say, I'm teaching somebody something somehow. Okay? It can be as simple as how to do a process, how to work through a problem, anything. Physically teaching. You're all teachers. Shocking. Okay? But everyone's an educator. Keep that in mind as we talk through why that's important about education and change. But we need to challenge a little bit about what we think about education. Okay? When we all started teaching, I should actually do the room quick. Who in here is actually a classroom teacher? Administrators? Everybody else? Cool. Oh, welcome. When we all went into education in one way, shape, or form, we probably had a preconceived notion of what it was going to be like. Right? Did that change? Ever? Once or twice? A week? Okay? Thinking about challenging that, it happened as we were going along, by necessity. Rarely do we give ourselves the time and the space to take that step back. Okay? I want you to think back 2 years ago. Okay, some of you blocked that from your memory. Okay? All the changes that you've done over the last 2 years, were a lot of it by necessity, right? It was, I'm being forced into a little window or a widget or whatever else you want to say. This is what we have to do now or yesterday. There was no proactive, it was only reactive. For us, we have to give ourselves that space to say, why are we doing what we're doing? We have to distance ourselves from the everyday. And that's hard. Okay? Make space. Give ourselves time. We're busy. I get that. So that's what some of what we're going to do today is going to look at. How do we take that step back and actually think about what it is that we do? All right. Who does this right now? Anybody? To think about what you're doing? A little bit? You try to, right? Okay. Hopefully focused on one or two little things you know you got to work on. Okay. Find a way to build it into what you do. Before school starts, after school ends, middle of the year, maybe not. But finding a way to make that space intentionally is hard, but it's necessary. Okay. So what are we doing? What are you doing? We teach in one way, shape, or form. We educate. So let's look at some of the whats. This is where you get to start talking here. What's the role of education?
To help children maximize the potential God has graced them.
Okay.
Inspire.
Inspiration.
Model for kids a life of faith.
Okay.
Improve.
Oh. Make things better. Okay. We're equipping students or adults. Okay. When's the last time you thought about that question? We just do it, right? Sometimes it's good to go all the way back to think, why am I doing what I do? At core level. How simple can I make that response statement? Okay. Now, from when you started, is that role different? The role of education? Has that changed at all? How so?
I would say that for me the role hasn't changed, but the process
Okay.
has changed a lot.
Okay. Some of the how.
Expectations have changed. whether it be from above us to us or from us to students.
Okay.
In some cases.
Okay.
For me, social interaction rather than just the education part.
Okay. Okay.
For me, education is not about ABC and 1, 2, 3 or the process we do it. We do education so that we can teach Jesus. And that hasn't changed.
Okay.
Sometimes education gets in the way of that. But the reason why it hasn't and shouldn't change where we are.
Okay.
Or will be.
Okay. Good. Which leads me to that one. What is the role? You hit it right on the head. Why we're here. Okay. You all have that written down or internalized in some way, shape, and form. Okay. And I love being in a room full where that answer is the same. Doesn't matter. Okay? Everybody's going to have that written in there. Now, let me ask this. We start talking about how to best move forward. What's your role as an educator? To do all this stuff about education, right? How would you define your role as an educator?
I feel like it changes each day because, like, sometimes it is about like teaching kids the content. Sometimes it's more focused on like spiritual growth. Sometimes you spend a lot of your days like almost like a counselor, splitting up students and dealing with like behavior sort of things. So it just kind of changes each day.
Okay. What else?
Facilitator.
Facilitator. Okay. Herder of cats. Okay, good. Preschool. Bless you. I have a 3-year-old. Okay.
It's not even that it differs on the day, it's that it differs on the kid.
Yeah. The needs change. The needs change. Parents' needs have changed. Yeah. And role as an educator in dealing with parents is a completely different beast when you look at it from dealing with children. Well, maybe. Okay. Has that role changed? A little bit, here and there? Over time? Some of you are like, yeah, a little bit, thinking back to what it looked like. Okay. How I manage things differently. How I go back and talk and think about it. All right. One thing that hasn't changed for your role as a teacher, and this is going to be really important going forward, is you all are learners as well. You're all here. Let's start with that, right? Your best practices. You took the time out of your extremely busy schedule to come hang out with a bunch of random Lutherans in Phoenix. It's Phoenix in February, we'll take that. But you're continuing to learn. When we talked about education, what the expectations are, what it is, sometimes we distance ourselves from we ourselves are learners. Okay, the expectation we have of our students is that they learn, they continue to grow. What about us? Okay, we need to have that expectation for ourselves as well. Now, some of that which I talked about in terms of growing and looking forward and how do we prepare ourselves for the future was we're going to change and look at our structure and our system and our processes and whatnot. Some of it could be as simple as your specific area of expertise that you're going to learn and grow more about. Some of it's ministry in general. But at the end of the day, you're continuing to learn. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, as you are learning, it's always helpful to learn outside of your comfort zone, right? Yikes. Don't take me outside of my bubble. But there's so many good ideas out there. Okay? How many of you have sat in on a session that you're like, this is not what I thought it was, but it's great? Because it's not what I do, and it's wonderful. It's got great ideas. Okay? I know for me, always, when I was either teaching or presenting or working at different spots, I made it a point to say one time during the year I was going to present on something that was uncomfortable to a group that was not my normal people. Okay? For a while there, I was presenting to the Joint Business Administrators Conference. Really? Okay? On technology and education. It's interesting how that weaves back through. But it forced me into a different mindset of learning myself, of how then that bleeds back into my teaching and going forward. For all of you, you're here, you're talking about where we're going forward. There are innumerable resources for looking at how to get from point A to point B with change. Okay? Anybody read any of them? Yeah? Couple? Start with why. Pretty popular. It's been around for a while. Couple thumbs up. Who moved my cheese? Get people thinking about, why are we changing? Where are we going from here? Is education changing? Why is that? Oh, goodness. And you probably notice a lot of these are not education-based. They're simply about change. And how to approach that. We have the context of education that we get. We understand. We know it. How to do it better. I'm currently working through Switch. Okay, when change is hard. Great reminder of what gets in the way of when we're trying to make changes. Subtle little things. You're like, wow, that's why it's doing that. Huh, go figure. Okay? And a whole long list. Okay? Dive into one. Continue to keep growing and learning. That's part of the process, like we said, with education. So that's the kind of the what we do. We do education, we learn, we continue to grow, we're going to keep pushing forwards. What about the why? The why is the really interesting question. Okay? I'm a why guy. Why are we doing that? Okay? Does anybody else in here ask why? Yeah. Are you stumped by the answer sometimes? More often than not, right? That why question is really important going forward. We have to ask why. Okay? We need to explore the why. Because in order to get to where you want to be, okay? If you're an administrator, you have that idea of where you want to go. If you're a teacher, you might have that idea of where I want to go in the classroom with what I'm doing, what I'm changing. In order to understand how you're going to get to the where, you need to know the why of what you're doing today. Okay? That's really essential. There is so much in the answer to why something is being done today that will lead you to where you're going, or indicate to where you're going, or influence where you're going. I'll give you an example. When I first started at Synod, one of the big things that I was tasked to do was a changeover for this little thing called the Lutheran School Portal. And LEAF, Lutheran, bless you, Educator Information Form.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, LEAF, long story short, lived on a server in the basement of Concordia, Chicago. It was antiquated and breaking and falling apart. And I said, okay, low-hanging fruit. Let's see what we can do to make this, bring it home, put it back in Synod, connect it with all the synodical resources and all the databases that's here. Great. I didn't stop to ask some of the why questions. I immediately ran into a wall. When somebody turned around and said, well, have you talked to the Council of Presidents yet? No. No, I haven't. Why? And then I started asking the why questions. And the answer I got was, well, they own the system and the process, and you have to go through them to make changes. I didn't do my due diligence of asking the why to understand what we were doing today, why that was the way that it was. Because, oh my goodness, did that influence how I moved forward. Okay? So, there's a lot of the why there. And knowing the why of why we're doing something is good if we can ask that question at the beginning without judgment. It's hard. Okay? from an understanding. I just want to know. I want to know why we do this. What's going on? And yes, there's that little voice in the back of your brain going, why are we doing it this way? Okay? But having an understanding will get you to that future state, from current to future. How do we get to that point? It's hard. But knowing the why. For us, in education, in Lutheran education, there's a couple reasons on the why we do things, if you want to clump it together. Okay? Some of the things in the why are cultural. Okay? You can probably think through what you do in your classroom, even you think a day in the life of a classroom, some of the cultural things, why we are the way we are. Some of those might be tied to your mission statement. Shocking. Some of those might be tied to who you are. Cultural. Some of them, rightfully, should be educational. The why. Okay? Best practices. Great name for a conference. Best practices of what you do based on educational practice and theory. Okay. Grounded in that why. And then there's some whys of the just because. We've always done it that way. Okay? Or there's no good answer. I love those. I don't know. Really? You have no idea why we're doing this? No. Yikes. That's when you can start having the conversations about where do we want to go from here. If you can honestly, when you look at the why and get no good reason or explanation, even of the history, now it's time to start explaining a little bit more and exploring what's going on. Okay? Again, exploring all of this why piece will set us up for where we want to go. Okay? So many times, and I kind of touched on this with the last year's worth of changes, so many times it's that knee-jerk reaction, well, we're just going to go to this. We're going to do it. And you trample right through that initial part of the process of asking, well, why do we do it the way that we do it now? Okay, let's understand that. Okay, so how is that going to change? If I'm making changes, what is that going to impact? If I'm making changes, who is that going to impact? What relationship building is either being helped, hampered, or destroyed? All of this going forwards, why do we do what we do? Okay, let's get to where we're going. Knowing in education, there's a couple things in the whys, though, that run into this category. Non-negotiables. Do you have any non-negotiables in what you do? Yeah. For whatever reason, there's certain things you're like, no, I can't change that. I may change the structure around it. I may change the way that we approach it. I may change the way of how we get from point A to point B. That just ain't going to change. Okay? It's good to explore those in your whys. Because if you realize that there's one of these that you try to move forwards with and go, oh, oops, that changes the whole way of going forward. That really messes stuff up. Doing that due diligence, that process, going into it, helps tremendously. This could be like hours, right? Are there any obstacles in changing what we do? What are some of them right now?
We've never done it that way. We've done it this way.
Yeah. A lot of that going on. What else? Resources is a challenge.
Right.
Yeah. My goodness.
And not having the right people to help facilitate the change or implement the change that you want to do.
Okay. People?
Sometimes it's not licensing or
Yeah.
state.
Yeah. No, that's... there's hurdles there. All of those things that you touched on, they're not small, are they? They're not. But they're not insurmountable in a lot of ways. Okay? Getting to that point of realizing, okay, we may have some things that we know that we just can't touch. Fine. What can we change in order to get to where we want to be? Okay? So a little bit of the what and a little bit of the why. Okay? So, we've done some reflecting. Hopefully you've started thinking a little bit. I'm going to split this in half. one of you. Okay, so here's where we get into the make it take it part of today. Years ago, there was a little deck of cards that was handed out at an LEA conference. Anybody remember these?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. It says, imagine the possibilities. Brought to you by Concordia, Wisconsin and Concordia, Ann Arbor. Okay. And in it were a series of questions. In it were a series of questions on cards, kind of written out, that are going to make your mind hurt a little bit. But kind of get you thinking along that, well, why do we do the way that we do? Or what are we doing? Or could we do something different? Or could we get better at something? Okay. What I handed you out there is the list, the collective list of all the questions that were included in this deck. Now, I loved when I was going through and doing little workshops with teachers and stuff like that. I'd literally just shuffle through and pull one to start a conversation about why we do things. What would you love to see happening in your classroom or school which you do not know how to make happen right now? Conversation ensues. Okay? But it's giving yourself the ability, the time, the space to ask those hard questions. Now, some of the questions that are in here are specifically written for administrators or other roles in the church. Others, you're like, okay, I can maybe even think down that road. And it gets you thinking about what type of challenging question can I ask? So here's what I want you to do. Randomly, no cheating, pick 5 numbers, any 5 numbers between 1 and 58. Jot them down somewhere.
Sequential?
Doesn't have to be. Scatter them around. So let's say you picked number 2. Okay, that's the second question in the list. Let's say you picked number 20. Count through 20. That one. I want you to go through, and even if you don't get to looking at all 5, or maybe you look at all 5 and go, I want to think about this one a little harder than the others. Look through and write down a few thoughts and answers to at least 2 or 3 of them. Okay? Take some time. Look and see what you got. If one of them that you picked was like, no, that's not me, you can pick another one. Or you can just, read the one above it, below it. But take some time. Think through the question. Be a little honest with yourself. Do some of the why thinking through of why you do what you do. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do that. And then I'll bring you all back together quick. And we're going to talk to those around us to see how each of us approach some of the questions you ran into. Some of the questions in there will make you giggle. Some of them will make you go, man, that is a great question. Okay? So take some time. Pick a couple. Challenge yourself to think through that of why we're doing what we do. I know. And there's my takeaway. Oh, it's crazy when you think back. It's like 7 years. Oh my gosh. See, there's a few names that you guys recognize in here. So a couple more minutes, think through one or two, and then I'll have you chat with your neighbor, your friend here. Share some ideas, learn from each other. So if you've got a good one, you can start talking with your neighbor quick. See if there's something that you can commiserate on or talk through, or just see how they explored an answer to one of the questions. So take a couple minutes here. The room will get loud and we'll come back together here with you.
Ended up on the one that help support her. Does a lot of copies. They have to
So another minute or two. So the hardest part is always to stop these great conversations. And please know that I'll be giving you some time back here at the end from the actual scheduled block time that you can, keep chatting with your neighbor or take it back and think some more about what's all in these lists of what you're looking at and challenging how you're thinking. The handout that I gave you and also the original card images are all also uploaded into the app for you. So if you want to, use those to to use with your administrators or ask questions of your teachers or anything else, or just personally to go, it's a great question that I should ruminate on for the next couple weeks or months. So all that being said, hopefully you had some good conversation. Hopefully you had some thinking through some of the why and thinking through where we could potentially be going, or you personally or your ministry could potentially be going. So where do we go from here? It's a great question. It's going to look different for each and every one of you. Okay? It's all driven by what results do you want to see? What do you want to get out of it? I mentioned earlier, you're all ahead of the game by the fact that you're doing professional development. You're here, you're learning. right? We, as educators, I'll put that on all of us. As educators, we're terrible about when we get home. All that we did, all that we learned, all that we heard, all that we talked about goes right out the window come Monday morning, a lot of the times. Okay? What results? What do you want to come out of what we talked about today? What is it that you thought through? One little thing. Take one thing. That's it. Don't have to reinvent the wheel. Come up with something that you're going to take back and you're going to change. You're going to think about something differently. You're going to work through something differently. Know the result that you want to see. Okay? Come up with some sort of plan. If you're thinking about change, you have to have a plan. My one rule always for change is you have to have the plan written down. If you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. Let's be real. Okay? And it won't happen. For any change, for any way going forward, research your why, learn about how things happened, put a plan in place, write it down, put it somewhere where people can hold you accountable, or you can hold yourself accountable. Okay? There's a reason why we all used to, still did, it's getting harder, put a post-it note on the edge of a computer screen, or a monitor, or on the door, or on the bathroom mirror. It held us accountable. It reminded us. That plan needs to be that forefront of what you're going for. Okay? The constant reminder. If it's written down, you can share it with people. They can help. They can start learning. They can make it their own. They can internalize it. They can do and answer those why questions, working together. But again, if you don't put a plan together, you don't write it down, it's as good as not existing for going forward. Always ask about what we're doing. What are we doing? How's that going to make us better? Me personally, my ministry, our organization. And always ask why. Hard question to ask, but getting people to ask that will continue to get them to grow. And you will see amazing benefits from that. It's a hard thing to get started. Don't get me wrong. It's a challenge. We have enough plates in the air and things that we're juggling and hats that we're wearing to sometimes stop and think about that. Our ultimate why hasn't changed. Rob touched on it earlier with, the Sunday school answer of Jesus. We know our why. That's an easy one. But some of the other whys aren't as easy to define. Keep asking why we do it. Okay? So you've got some tools. Hopefully you've picked up a couple things. You're like, oh yeah, we could do it that way. Or, I never thought about it that way. Or, maybe I should start with why. Or any of that. Take one thing. Bring it home with you. Ask questions. Challenge the norm. Like I said, it's not one of those, here's the 10 things that are going to change. I can give you those and it changes. Shocking. Okay? But to get into that mindset of continuous improvement going forwards is huge. Okay? All right. So, again, there's me. You've got the resources in the app. You know how to get in touch with me if there's any other questions or things that you want to learn more about or think about or bounce around. I'm giving you some time back for the day. Use it wisely. Read through. Maybe answer another question or two. Go lay in the sun. It's up to you. Okay? Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your Best Practices Conference.